I'm 34 and I decided to take a long weekend to get away. I figured I'd head into the mountains, camp a little, hike a little, and let my brain finally unclench. Just me, the trees, and some quiet. It sounded perfect. I picked a trail I'd read about on a hiking forum, the Ridgeway Loop. People said it was a moderate hike with a few great overlooks. The part that really sold me was that it didn't get much foot traffic. I wasn't in the mood for small talk with strangers in sporty gear. So, before sunrise, I tossed my things into the back of my old Jeep and drove 5 hours. The towns got smaller, the roads thinner, and soon it was just me among green hills rolling like waves. I could almost feel the stress sliding off as I drove deeper in. When I reached the trailhead, the parking lot was completely empty. Normally, total isolation in the woods doesn't thrill me. My mind jumps to all the wrong possibilities. But that day, it felt like a gift. I parked, stretched, checked my map, and slung on my pack. The air hit me first, cool, clean, and sharp, like it had never been breathed before. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about work or anything at all, except how good it felt to finally be out there. The first few miles were easy. The trail wandered through tall, straight trees, their trunks rising like pillars. The ground was soft with old leaves, just enough crunch to remind me I was outdoors, but not enough to feel disruptive. By midday, I came across a small creek with water so clear it looked unreal. It felt like the right place to stop, so I set up camp nearby. I pitched my tent, made some simple noodles on my little stove, and ate sitting on a flat rock, listening to nothing but water sliding over stones. No cars, no voices, no constant hum of electronics, just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you question why you live any other way. As night settled in, I built a small fire and watched it flicker until the stars appeared overhead. Everything felt simple and manageable again, as if life had shifted back into a version I could keep up with. When my eyes started to feel heavy, I crawled into my tent, zipped it up, and let the stillness wrap around me. The next morning, I woke early to crisp air that made me feel awake and energized. I grabbed a small day pack with water and snacks and decided to hike higher up the ridge to find one of the overlooks the map promised. The climb was steeper than I expected, but it felt good. My legs working, my lungs burning in the best way. For a while, I even forgot why I'd come out there in the first place. Then the trail markers disappeared. At first, I thought I'd just missed one. No big deal. I backtracked a bit and scanned the trees for a bright orange blaze. Nothing. Still, the dirt path beneath me looked like a real trail, worn and clear, so I kept following it. That's when things started to feel off. The first strange thing was a piece of old rope hanging from a tree branch. It looked weathered and wrong somehow, like it had been left there after something unpleasant. The bark above it had a dark ring, as if part of the branch had been burned long ago. I stared at it longer than I should have, wondering who would do that in the middle of nowhere. I kept going, but slower now. A little farther along, I spotted bones scattered across the dirt, pale against the ground. Not a full skeleton, just pieces, a rib, a long bone that didn't look quite like what I expected. My logical brain said it must have been an animal, but my stomach twisted anyway. After that, the silence changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt heavier, like the air itself had weight. Even my footsteps sounded different, too sharp, too loud, like they didn't belong. That's when I decided I'd seen enough and should head back. But when I turned around, nothing behind me looked the same. The slope seemed steeper, the trees closer together, almost leaning in. I couldn't see the rope or the bones or anything familiar. Then I heard it. Not footsteps. Not an animal. Breathing, slow and deliberate, pulling air in with effort. Then the exhale, thick and uneven like it hurt. I froze where I stood. It came again, closer, followed by a low murmur. Not any words I recognized, just broken sounds, like someone trying to mimic speech without knowing how. My skin went cold. Every part of me wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. Not until I heard a new sound, wood creaking, like something large shifting its weight against a tree. I ran. Branches snapped against my arms and face, but I didn't care. My lungs burned. My legs begged to stop, but I kept going. I had no idea if I was even on a trail anymore. I just pushed through brush and trees, heart racing so loud it drowned everything else out. Then, through the trees, I caught a familiar color. Blue. my tarp, my campsite. I stumbled into the clearing, grabbed my pack with shaking hands, and didn't even bother with the tent or the fire. I threw the straps on and ran downhill as if the forest itself was closing behind me. At one point, I made the mistake of looking back. Up on the ridge between two trees, something stood. It was tall, too tall. Its arms hung long and straight, and its head tilted to the side at an angle that didn't look natural, as if it was trying to understand what it was seeing. Its skin blended with the bark around it, and just for a second, I thought the forest had taken shape. Then it opened its mouth. There was no shout or roar, just my name, drawn out in a voice that sounded strained and uneven, almost like someone trying to copy the sound of a human voice and not quite getting it right. After that, everything is a blur. Trees rushing past, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth from biting my tongue, my heartbeat pounding in my head. I didn't stop until the woods opened suddenly onto a gravel road. By the time I reached a ranger station, I was exhausted and barely making sense. They told me I'd gone 7 miles off any marked trail and asked if I had seen wildlife. I just shook my head. I didn't know how to explain what I had seen, or thought I had seen. I got in my Jeep and drove until the mountains were nothing more than a fading shape in my rearview mirror. Story 2, I was hiking a remote stretch of trail down in southern West Virginia when it happened. I'd been planning the trip for weeks. I needed it. I parked at the trailhead around 9 in the morning. Blue sky, cool air that hit like a wake-up slap. The first few miles were easy. Gentle slopes, long, open views through the trees, birds chattering like they had gossip to share. I remember thinking, this is perfect, like I'd picked the exact right place to disappear for a bit. By early afternoon, I passed an old fire tower, totally out of use, rusted and broken, like something left behind after the world ended. Its metal frame stuck up through the tree line. For a second, I thought about climbing it for the view, but something about it felt wrong, like if I touched it, the whole thing would come down on top of me. I kept walking. That's when I saw the footprints. At first, it didn't register. The trail had been empty all day. No parked cars where I started, no hikers passing by. But there they were in a soft patch of mud where rainwater must have pooled. They looked like boot prints at a glance, but when I crouched down, my stomach flipped. The heel was too narrow. The toes stretched long, like someone had pulled the front of the boot like taffy. And the tread, warped, not worn down like old shoes, but twisted, almost melted, as if heat had scrambled the pattern and pressed it into the dirt. Worst of all, they were fresh, edges sharp, soil still damp inside the grooves. Whoever left them wasn't far. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a hunter with custom boots. Maybe just a weird angle messing with my eyes. Still, my brain wouldn't let it go, so I picked up the pace. By 4, I hit a fork. One trail dipped toward a stream, the other climbed a ridge. The map said the shelter was up past the ridge, so I started climbing. Each step felt heavier, like my pack had doubled in weight. The higher I went, the quieter it got. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of my boots and my heartbeat drumming behind my ribs. Halfway up, I stopped cold. The footprints were back. Same warped shape, same narrow heel and stretched toe, only this time they were ahead of me again, sunk deep into the mud like something heavier had walked through. I followed them a little, trying to make sense of it. And then they just stopped. Right there in the middle of the trail. No rocks to step on, no other tracks leading off. Just gone, as if the thing or person walked 10 feet in front of me and evaporated. I stood there way too long, waiting for my brain to offer an explanation. All I kept thinking was, things don't just vanish. When I finally reached the ridge, the sun was bleeding out fast. The shelter sat in a clearing, weathered, old, but solid. Roof still on, a big wooden platform for sleeping, a blackened fire ring out front. No sign of anyone else. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. I dropped my pack and went through the motions. Filter water, boil noodles, hang the food bag in a tree like you're supposed to. Everything felt mechanical, like I was just playing at being calm. By the time I crawled into my sleeping bag, night had swallowed the clearing. I must have fallen asleep because the sound hit me out of nowhere. Soft, dragging, slow, like something brushing along the outside wall of the shelter. I froze. My breathing went shallow on instinct, as if that would make me invisible. Whatever it was circled the shelter step by step. I could feel faint vibrations in the wood beneath me. When it reached the back wall, the sound changed. Sharp, hollow pops, like two stones knocking together in an uneven rhythm. Click, 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 pause. Then silence. I don't know how long I lay there before reaching for my headlamp. My hands shook so badly I couldn't hit the switch at first. When the beam finally cut through the dark, I swept it across the clearing, and that's when I saw it, just at the edge of the light. Tall, too tall. Its body looked stretched, limbs hanging long with joints bending in ways joints shouldn't bend. Skin pale and tight, like plastic wrap stretched over sticks. And the head, that's what burned into me, narrow at the top, wide at the jaw, a mouthful of teeth catching the light. Even though its lips didn't move, it tilted its head slow and sharp, bird-like. Then the clicking started again, but its mouth stayed shut. The sound wasn't just coming from it anymore. It was in the trees, in the ground, everywhere. I moved backward, slow, toward my pack, never taking my eyes off it. Every step felt like an hour. The thing didn't move, just stood there, head twitching in tiny jerky motions like it was studying me, deciding something. When my hand hit the straps, I grabbed the pack and ran. I didn't even try to find the trail. I plowed straight into the trees, crashing through brush, branches ripping at my clothes. Behind me, snaps, cracks, too many for one thing. The clicking followed, louder, faster, until it sounded like 100 teeth chattering in the dark. I don't know how long I ran. My lungs felt like fire. My legs turned to hollow sticks. When I stumbled into a stream, I didn't think. I waded in up to my knees and followed it downstream, water freezing against my skin, until I caught the glint of a guardrail through the trees. When I climbed up onto the road, my legs nearly gave out. A truck came by about an hour later. The driver didn't ask much, just stared at me in the rear view while I shook in the back seat like a busted engine. I never went back for my gear. 2 days later, a ranger called. They'd found my food bag still hanging in the tree, but not the shelter. I thought he meant it had burned down. He said there was nothing there. Story 3. My parents owned this old cabin way out in the Appalachian foothills. My grandfather built it before paved roads even reached the area. To get there, you follow a dirt track for what feels like forever, then hike another half-mile on foot. It's isolated in the purest sense of the word. The cabin itself is simple. One room, a creaky wooden floor, an old wood stove for heat, and a propane lantern for light. That's it. No electricity, no plumbing, and definitely no cell service. It's the kind of place that teaches you quickly just how loud your own breathing sounds when the rest of the world goes quiet. My parents mostly used it during hunting season, and the rest of the year it just sat out there collecting dust and the occasional raccoon paw print. I'd been there plenty of times, always with family or a couple of friends. But this time, I decided to go alone. I'd just finished one of those brutal stretches at school, you know, the kind where days blur together. 3 weeks of almost no sleep, non-stop caffeine, and turning in assignments at 3 in the morning. My brain felt fried. I didn't want to see another screen or hear another notification. I just wanted silence, and the cabin was perfect for that. Friday afternoon, I parked at the end of the dirt track. You can't drive the whole way unless you're okay with destroying your suspension. I slung my pack over my shoulder and hiked in. It was one of those hikes where you immediately regret how much you packed. But when I finally saw the cabin through the trees, a wave of calm hit me. It was like stepping off the grid in every sense. The first night was perfect. I lit a fire, cooked something simple, basically just canned chili heated in a pot, and read by lantern light until my eyes felt like sandpaper. Around midnight, I locked up, put the deadbolt on the door, and checked the windows twice. Out here, that's habit. When you're surrounded by miles of dark forest, you double-check everything. Then I crawled into the old bed that's been there longer than I've been alive. The next morning, something felt wrong. It wasn't a sound or a smell, just a feeling that caught me the second I opened my eyes. It took a moment to notice why. The door was unlocked, and I knew I had locked it. Not just locked, deadbolted. I remembered testing the knob before going to bed. Out here, you don't forget something like that. But the bolt was thrown back. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe I was tired and forgot. Maybe I didn't turn it all the way. That seemed logical, right? Still, the thought lingered in the back of my mind all day like a stone in my shoe. By evening, I tried to shake it off. I cooked, cleaned up, and sat on the little porch for a while. The quiet out there plays tricks on you. Every squirrel sounds like a bear. Every twig snap feels personal. And when the sun goes down, it doesn't fade like in the city. It just drops. One moment light, The next moment, the world is black. Around 11, I was inside, rocking gently in the old chair by the stove, half dozing. When I heard it, something stepped onto the porch. Not light steps, heavy, slow. Each board let out a long, strained groan like it didn't want to hold the weight. I froze, my eyes locked on the door. The boards creaked again, then silence. I didn't even breathe. My heart felt like it had climbed into my throat. 10 seconds passed, 20, maybe a full minute. Nothing. Finally, I reached for the rifle in the corner, moving as quietly as I could, and crept to the window. The glass was old and wavy, making everything outside look distorted. The yard was just shapes and shadows. I told myself it had to be a deer or maybe a bear. That was the reasonable explanation. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I locked the door again, checked it twice, then wedged a chair under the handle. Sleeping after that? Not a chance. Every creak of the cabin felt amplified. Every pop from the stove sounded like footsteps. Around 3 in the morning, my eyes snapped open again. Something felt different. It took me a second to realize why. Light. A pale glow slid across the far wall. Not firelight. Not my lantern. It was coming from outside. I sat up slowly, my throat dry, and moved to the window. There was something in the yard. At first I thought I was overtired and imagining things. But then it moved. A figure, tall, unnaturally tall, thin in a fragile, stretched-out way, like a scarecrow pulled too far. It stood there with its head tilted back slightly, almost like it was testing the air. Its skin, or whatever it had, looked gray in the moonlight, blending with the trees. Then it turned. Not quickly, just a slow, uneven twist, as if its joints didn't quite fit right, until it was facing the cabin. The moonlight caught its eyes, and they reflected, pale and metallic. My fingers dug into the window frame. It didn't walk like a person. It almost glided like its legs weren't bending the way they should. I lifted the rifle, hands shaking so badly I could barely steady it. But the figure didn't come closer. It just stood there watching. Then, without a sound, it slipped back into the trees. I sat there until dawn, rifle across my lap, eyes locked on that window. Every sound outside felt loaded with meaning. When daylight finally came, I stepped outside and my stomach dropped. Tracks, not human and not any animal I recognized. 4 long toes, each ending in a blunt claw. The prints were deep. Whatever made them was heavy. They circled the cabin twice. I wanted to leave right then, but the idea of walking that half-mile through dense woods knowing something was out there, my legs wouldn't move. So I stayed all day, rifle across my lap, watching the door and windows. The forest was silent. No birds, no insects, just nothing. When the sun began to sink again, my stomach tightened. I knew it would come back, and it did. Just after midnight, the boards on the porch groaned under a heavy weight. Slow steps moved across the porch. Then tap on the window. I didn't move, didn't blink. Another tap. Then a long scraping sound along the wall, like something dragging claws gently across the wood. And then a voice, low, rough, like someone trying to speak through a damaged throat. At first it was just noise, wrong and uneven. But as it went on, the sound began shaping into something. My name. Over and over like it was practicing. It circled the cabin for hours, tapping, scraping, repeating my name with that strained voice. At some point, exhaustion must have taken over because the next thing I remember is sunlight streaming through the window. I stepped outside and my blood ran cold. More tracks, dozens of them, around the cabin, across the porch, right up to the door. And carved into the dirt were lines, shape symbols maybe. I didn't look long enough to understand them. I grabbed my pack and ran. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I don't know what that thing was, or how it knew my name. But I know one thing. I'm never going back to that cabin again. Story 4, I'd been on that trail before, but never this far out, and never in winter. The cold changes everything. The trees stood stripped and stark, their branches clawing at a low gray sky. Underfoot, months of rotting leaves had settled into a soft, spongy layer. I set out at 10, planning to hit the overlook, eat a sandwich, and make it back before the sun slipped away. 12 miles round trip, 6 up, 6 down, doable. I've done harder. About 2 hours in, I noticed the quiet. Not just quieter, silent. The kind of silence that doesn't announce itself. It just arrives. 1 minute there's a woodpecker tapping, a squirrel kicking through leaves, branches creaking in the wind, and then nothing, like someone cut the sound on the whole world. It took a minute to register. I kept walking, then stopped and listened, my breath fogging the air. No birds, no wind, not even the distant groan of trees shifting. Just my boots grinding the frozen dirt and a heartbeat that suddenly felt too loud. I told myself it wasn't strange, animals hunker down in the cold. But the way it happened, so sharply, like a switch flipping, felt wrong. It didn't fade. It stopped. The trail tightened as it climbed along a rock face, a section that demands focus because one bad step means sliding 30 feet into a nest of boulders. On my left, a wall of stone was slick with ice, glossy as glass. On my right, the drop waited, one of those views that makes your stomach roll if you stare too long. I kept my eyes on the ground, counting steps like a kid on a balance beam. That's when I saw something dark against the pale ground ahead. At first I figured it was a scrap of fabric. People lose things out here all the time. But up close it wasn't fabric. It was hair. A clump of it, black, coarse, matted with something too dark to be mud. Thick strands clung together like they'd been ripped out, not shed. I crouched without touching it and just stared. Something about it, the size, the texture, the way it lay there like it didn't belong, made my stomach knot. Too much for a squirrel, wrong texture for a deer, and definitely not bear. Maybe a dog, I thought. Someone's hound. But there was no blood, no paw prints, nothing. I should have turned around. Everything in me knew that. But I didn't. I kept walking because apparently my survival instincts were on vacation. Another half-mile and I spotted something pale against the dark leaves, leaning on a fallen log. From a distance it looked like a stick. Closer it wasn't wood. It was a bone, long, smooth, and wrong. Too thin for a deer leg, too clean to be random debris. The ends weren't sharp. They were worn down, polished slick like they'd been worked over and over. Then I saw the footprints. They were off the trail in a patch of soil that hadn't frozen yet. Big enough to be human, but barefoot and not right. The toes curled inward, sharp and hooked like claws. The arches rose too high, like whoever left them didn't walk the way we do. That's when the small voice in my head went from, weird to get out now. And for a second I almost listened. I almost turned around. But the thought of going back down that trail felt worse than going forward. The silence had weight, pushing me toward the overlook, like if I turned my back, something would follow. The trail ended at the ridge. No more path, just a sheer drop and miles of layered hills, a gray-green ocean under a flat sky. I should have felt relief at the end point. Instead, I felt exposed, like standing in the middle of a field during a storm. That's when I heard it behind me. Not footsteps. A dragging sound, something sliding through leaves. A long pull, a pause. Again closer. I turned. It stood at the tree line. My brain tried to file it under man at first. It was crouched low, arms hanging so far they nearly brushed the ground. Then it shifted, and my stomach dropped, because nothing about that shape was right. Too thin, too long. The skin looked off. Not exactly pale, more like stretched leather that had been rained on and dried too fast. And the head, too large for the body, heavy, hanging forward like the neck couldn't quite bear the weight. It didn't hurry. It just stood there, its spine bending in slow, unsettling arcs, like there were extra joints hidden along it. And the sound, a wet clicking, over and over like teeth chattering without lips to hide them. I edged backward toward the cliff without meaning to. Every nerve in me screamed run, but my legs felt locked. My breath came short and sharp like I'd been hit. The thing tilted its head, slow and curious, like it was trying to look through me. Then it dropped, flat, so fast it looked like gravity had yanked it down, and it started crawling. Not like a person, not like any animal I know. Its arms and legs bent the wrong way, joints snapping loudly enough to hear. The clicking didn't stop. That broke me. I ran. I don't remember the first 100 yards, just trees whipping past, boots slipping on ice and leaves. Every time I stumbled, I felt it right behind me, close enough to catch my ankle. I never heard normal footsteps, only that dragging scrape and the click, click, click getting faster, sharper. I lost the trail twice, crashed through brush, tore my hands on rock, and still I ran. My lungs burned until I tasted iron. My vision tunneled. Every shadow leaned at me. I didn't stop until the glint of my truck flashed through the trees. I slammed into the door hard enough that it bounced back. I dove inside, yanked it shut, and jammed the key into the ignition with hands that didn't feel like mine. When the engine roared, I heard one last click. Close. Too close, I didn't look back. I threw it in gear and tore down the dirt road, the wheel jerking under my grip. And I didn't care. I haven't gone back to that ridge. My uncle had this old hunting cabin buried so deep in the Appalachians, it might as well have been on another planet. No GPS, no cell signal. Just 3 hours from the nearest town, 2 from the closest gas station, and surrounded by forests that felt older than anything human. When I called to ask if I could stay for the weekend, he hesitated. Not long, but long enough for me to notice. Then he said, "Sure, don't expect much. It's rough out there." His voice had this edge to it, like he wanted to add something else but didn't. I laughed and asked, "Anything I should know?" There was a pause, long enough that I thought the call dropped. Then he said, "Keep the generator off at night. It leaks fuel sometimes." I joked, "Got it. No explosions. Anything else?" Another pause. "Don't wander after dark. You'll get turned around out there." That was all. No story, no explanation. Just that flat warning that sat in the back of my mind the entire drive. The road felt endless. Switchbacks curling up the mountains like a coiled snake. The ridges were nothing but black outlines against a sky that couldn't decide if evening was coming or going. By the time I reached the dirt track leading in, the sun was gone. The truck rattled over potholes and loose gravel. Trees leaned in so close my headlights painted shadows across the windshield like moving hands. Eventually, the road stopped feeling like a road at all, more like a narrow tunnel carved straight through the woods. The cabin was smaller than I remembered. A sagging little box with a porch that looked like it was sliding off one side. The steps groaned under my weight. When I opened the door, a wave of old pine and something faintly metallic hit me, like damp tools left in a shed. Inside was simple. 1 bedroom, a kitchen with a hand pump, and a living room with a stone fireplace that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. The silence in there was so thick it almost felt physical. I dropped my bag, made a quick meal on the propane stove, and sat on the porch until the light faded completely. Out there, darkness doesn't ease in, it drops. 1 second the ridges were dark shapes, the next they were gone, swallowed in black. I locked the door, turned off the lamps, and spread my sleeping bag on the couch. For a long time I just stared at the ceiling, listening to nothing but the ring of my own ears. That's how quiet it was. Sleep didn't stick. I'd drift off and snap awake, heart racing like it heard something before I did. I blamed nerves. I blamed the old wood settling. I repeated that to myself until I heard the scrape. It wasn't loud, just enough to slip into my half-sleep and pull me fully awake. A slow drag, like something sliding along the outer wall of the cabin. I froze. My mind tried to offer explanations. Tree branches in the wind, maybe a raccoon. The forest makes strange noises at night. I almost believed it until it came again. Longer this time. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. Not random, steady, like someone tracing their hand down the wall on purpose. I eased out of the sleeping bag. The floorboards were icy against my feet. The hatchet I'd used earlier leaned against the wall, and my hand wrapped around the handle without thinking. I stood there, gripping it so tightly my knuckles ached, staring at the door. The sound shifted, closer now, near the kitchen window. And with it came another sound, long, unhurried breathing, like someone taking in the scent of the wood as they leaned against it. Instinct told me one thing: stay quiet. I crept toward the kitchen, each step making the board sigh. I eased a finger into the curtain and pulled it back just enough to peek out. Nothing. Just my reflection in the glass and layers of darkness behind it. Still, I felt more than saw a movement. The kind that makes your eyes want to shape shadows into a figure. Then everything went silent. The kind of silence that feels like the air itself is holding still. Footsteps followed, slow, heavy, circling the cabin. I backed away, breathing shallow, hatchet raised. The steps faded, softer, then gone. A minute passed. 2, 5. The cabin stayed still as if it was afraid to make a sound. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, hatchet across my lap, eyes on the door, until the first thin gray light touched the windows. When it was bright enough to see, I stepped outside. The yard was damp with morning dew, and the air felt sharp in my chest. That's when I saw the tracks. Not boots, not paws. A single line of them from the porch to the trees, deep enough to hold water. Split at the front, like 2 hooked points had pressed into the earth with each step. I followed them because for some reason I needed to know. They went 30, maybe 40 yards, weaving between pines, and then stopped. No disturbed leaves, no broken branches, nothing beyond that point. Like whatever made them had simply stepped out of existence. That broke something in me. I turned and ran back to the cabin, packed fast, so fast I barely remember stuffing things into the bag, and threw everything into the truck bed. When the engine started, it sounded almost eager, like it wanted out too. The road back was a blur of gravel and sharp turns. I told myself I was fine. I told myself it was over. I clung to that until I reached the last bend before the highway. That's where I saw it. It crouched at the tree line, watching. Its outline was pale, its limbs too long, its posture wrong, like the shape of a person drawn by someone who had never actually seen one. The arms hung low, and the head tilted slowly as I passed, as if following me with its eyes. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just drove. I've lived in the Blue Ridge foothills my entire life. Out here, you learn the backroads before you even know the main highway. That's just how it is. My dad used to say the mountains had their own rules. He'd tell me, the ridges will keep secrets if you know how to look for them. I never really thought much about that until the night I realized one of those ridges might want to keep me. It was late on a Sunday in March, just before dark. One of those evenings where you feel like you've already done enough for the day, but somehow you're still doing more. I'd been at my cousin's place helping him split wood. He lives way out, past where the pavement ends and the mailbox is nailed to a tree. The kind of road that's more suggestion than structure. The shortcut home from there is an old logging track that winds about 20 minutes through the forest before spitting you back out near town. I've taken it more times than I can count. It's rough, sure, full of ruts and dips where you've got to straddle the ditch, but it saves a good half hour. Plus, I've always liked the quiet out there. But that evening, the quiet didn't feel right. It felt heavy, like the air itself was pressing down. A storm had rolled through earlier, short and mean, lots of wind and a burst of rain. Now everything was wet and gray, the world washed out. No birds, no bugs. Just the sound of my tires sucking through the mud as I crept along. About 6 miles in, I hit a tree. A big one, poplar, I think, stretched across the track like someone had laid it there on purpose. The roots were torn out on one side, clawing at the sky. I killed the engine, stepped out, and walked around to see if I could move it. That's when I froze. The underside of the trunk was stripped bare. Not jagged like it had scraped the ground, but smooth, like it had been shaved clean. The roots were worse. Something had chewed through them. Not snapped or splintered, chewed, with deep grooves curling in on themselves like hooks. Big enough to slide your fingers into if you were stupid enough to try. It didn't make sense. Too big for a beaver, too strange for a bear. The longer I stared, the more the back of my neck prickled. I went back to the truck and grabbed my phone to call my cousin. Maybe he could bring a saw. No signal, not even a flicker. So I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, running through my options. Backtrack 20 minutes in fading light, or try to move a tree that looked heavier than my truck. Neither sounded good. That's when I heard it. A scrape of metal against stone. Not from the woods, from under the truck. Every muscle in my body locked up. The keys were still in my hand. I hadn't even started the engine. Slowly, I opened the door, crouched down, and looked underneath. Nothing. Just mud and leaves clinging to the frame. I let out a shaky breath, probably just a rock shifting. Maybe I imagined it. I stood up and brushed the mud off my jeans, and then I saw movement between the trees. Not a deer, not anything I knew, too pale, too low to the ground. It moved fast, gliding, almost like a piece of paper sliding across a floor. I only caught a flash before it melted into the dark, but it was enough to twist my gut. I climbed back into the truck and slammed the lock down without thinking. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The woods were dead quiet now. No wind. No drip from the branches. Nothing. Then came the scraping again. Not under the truck this time, but on the bed. Slow, long drags like claws on metal. I stared through the rear window, my breath fogging the glass. Nothing there, just gray trees and my own reflection. I told myself it was nerves, that the storm had me jumpy, then the tailgate slammed. One heavy hit like something had dropped onto it from above. The whole truck jolted forward. I didn't think. I just jammed the key in, twisted and floored it. The tires spun in the mud before catching, and then I was flying down that track. Branches whipped the mirrors, mud sprayed everywhere. Half a mile later, I made the mistake of looking in the rearview mirror. It was there, running in the middle of the track. Not crawling anymore, upright but wrong, its shoulders bent like broken wings, arms so long they nearly scraped the ground. Its head hung forward, jaw swinging too wide like it wasn't attached right. Its skin was white, so white it almost glowed, and its eyes were two black holes that swallowed everything. I floored it again. The truck fishtailed, nearly clipped a tree, but I didn't stop until the woods broke and the tires hit asphalt. I kept driving, didn't stop for 10 miles. When I finally did, I was shaking so hard I could barely turn the key off. I got out and walked to the back. The tailgate was bent inward, deep grooves curling along the metal, sharp enough to catch a fingernail. I drove straight to my cousin's and told him everything. Sold the truck the next week, and I haven't taken that logging road since. I've been doing power line inspections for 6 years now. That means a lot of long drives, a lot of gas station coffee, and a lot of time spent in places where you can go hours without seeing another person. If you've never been out here in the Appalachians, it's hard to explain just how deep it really gets. The mountains fold in on themselves, swallowing everything until the roads turn into scars that vanish into the brush. There are places where your GPS gives up before you even hit the first turn. After that, you're on your own. Just mud, rock, and trees leaning in close like they're tired of letting you pass. Last fall, I got called out for an outage up on Mill Branch Ridge. Nobody outside the locals even calls it that, and you won't find the name on any map. Mill Branch is one of those places that doesn't exist on paper, but everyone around here knows it. They don't talk about it much, though, and when they do, it's in passing. A quiet warning like, "Don't drive that way after dark." They make it sound like they're talking about potholes or maybe meth labs. But there's something in their voice, an edge that says they know more than they're willing to say. Dispatch told me the line went down after a storm, probably a blown insulator or a tree limb across the wires. Nothing unusual. I loaded up the truck, checked my gear twice, and hit the road before sunrise to beat the fog. The first hour wasn't bad. Paved county roads, a few gas stations with flickering neon signs, and the usual stray dogs chasing the truck like it was the highlight of their day. But the deeper I drove, the emptier it got. The last house I passed looked like it had been abandoned for years. 2 stories, leaning on stilts over a slow, sick-looking creek. The windows were blacked out, no curtains, no signs of life. Even the mailbox looked tired, bent forward like it was bowing in defeat. Past that point, the gravel started and everything else just stopped. No signals, no houses, no signs, just bare trees clawing at the gray sky, crowding the road until it felt like driving through the ribs of something dead. When I finally reached the gate to the right-of-way, it was little more than a rusted chain looped through 2 leaning posts that looked older than the road itself. The padlock was so corroded I had to throw my whole weight into the wrench to get it open. Company rules say you're supposed to log your time, location, and conditions before you leave the main road, so I pulled out my phone. No signal, not even a flicker. No surprise there, I drove in anyway. The tires slipped through ruts, turned into trenches of mud from the storm. The path was barely wide enough for the truck. Brush closed in on both sides, like the forest wanted to erase the road behind me. The only sounds were the engine groaning and the branches scraping the mirrors like fingernails. I made it about 2 miles before the grade turned ugly, steep enough that going forward felt like asking to roll over. So I parked on a flat stretch, threw on my vest, and started walking pole to pole with the scope. The first few were fine, crossarm solid, no loose hardware, no scorch marks. Honestly, it didn't even look like the storm had done much damage. But when I reached pole 117, everything changed. The ground wasn't just wet, it was black. Not dark brown like soaked dirt, but black, like oil had bled out and pooled around the base of the pole. It glistened even in the dull daylight, heavy and slick, like it had weight. It didn't run off or soak in, just sat there, like the earth had rotted from the inside out. And right in the middle was something pale. At first I thought it was bark, or maybe a deer bone washed up by the rain. But when I crouched down and brushed the mud away, I froze. It wasn't bone. It looked like skin, grayish-white, wrinkled, stretched thin over something with hard ridges underneath. Tendons, maybe. I was still staring when it moved. Just a small twitch, like a muscle spasm under the surface. I stumbled back so fast I nearly fell. My first thought was that it was some injured animal clinging to life, until I heard it. A sound that still sets my teeth on edge when I think about it. Not breathing. Not a growl. A click. wet and deliberate, like someone pressing their tongue against the roof of their mouth. But it didn't sound right. It was too deep, too hollow, like it came from a throat that didn't know how to make noise. I swung my light toward the tree line. At first nothing, just rows of trunks fading into the shadows. Then something moved, low to the ground, sliding between two trees like smoke before pulling itself upright. And God, I wish I hadn't seen what stood there. It was tall, too tall, and thin, with arms so long the hooked fingers nearly brushed its knees. That same gray-white skin, slick and hairless, like the thing in the mud had come from it. Where its eyes should have been were hollows, not empty but darker than everything around them, like the light itself died there. And its mouth, it didn't just open, it split. The jaw peeled back in two directions, cracking wide like someone splitting a log. I started backing up, slow at first, then faster, every nerve screaming to turn and run. But I couldn't take the light off it. The black muck sucked at my boots, clinging in oily ropes. Then the smell hit, metallic and sweet, sharp enough to claw the back of my throat. Copper, like blood left in water too long. The thing moved without sound, no branches breaking, no leaves rustling. Its legs bent wrong at the joints, and when it straightened to full height, its spine arched back so far it looked like it was trying to scrape the sky. I hit the truck door with my hip, fumbling the keys with shaking hands. Dropped them once, somehow got them in the ignition. When the engine roared to life, the sound cracked through the silence like a gunshot. That's when I saw it again. It was standing at the edge of the clearing now, head tilted, mouth working open and shut in those awful silent gulps. I slammed the gas. Mud flew up like shrapnel as the tires bit in. I didn't even look in the mirror for the first 100 yards. When I finally did, I wished I hadn't. It was chasing me, not upright anymore. Down on all fours, its limbs folding and unfolding like a spider's, jerking forward in bursts that closed the distance too fast. It wasn't fast enough to catch me, but it wasn't falling far behind either. Mud slapped against its body and it didn't even flinch. Just before I hit the final bend near the gate, it stopped. Stood there in the track, rising back onto two legs, bent like a question mark. Its head tilted one way, then the other, slow and curious, like it was studying me, memorizing me. Even when the trees finally swallowed it, I could still feel those hollow eyes on me. I didn't breathe right again until I hit pavement 20 minutes later. My boots were still slick with that black muck, and the cab reeked of that copper-sweet stench soaked into the seats. I logged the outage as cleared. Never told a soul what I saw. If I did, they'd laugh. Or worse, they'd send me back out there with some safety guy watching my every move. But Pole 117 is still on my route, and every time I get assigned to that sector I trade shifts, because I know what I saw. My shift at the ranger station wrapped up around 7 that night. I'd stayed late. Hikers love to stretch the daylight in the summer, but the trails had been empty for hours. Truth was, I wasn't really working. I was just shuffling papers around, pretending. I didn't want to go home. Home was a rented cabin way out in the hollow. The kind of place people call peaceful. Like that's a good thing. No neighbors, no traffic. Just trees swallowing everything for miles. At first I thought I'd lucked out. Cheap rent, plenty of space, quiet. But by the third month, that quiet didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt held, like the woods were listening. That night, instead of taking the main paved route, I decided to cut down the old service road that runs along the ridge before dropping into the valley. Hardly anyone uses it now. Logging trucks used to, but those days are long gone. The road's rough, long, full of blind curves and gravel that hums under your tires. It adds about 20 extra minutes to the drive, but I didn't mind. I just wanted a little time to clear my head before pulling into that cabin again. By the time I hit the gravel, the sun was gone. My headlights cut a narrow tunnel through the dark, catching flashes of pale tree trunks and tangled briars that looked like barbed wire. Every so often, a cicada would start up somewhere out in the black, buzzing loud, then cutting off mid-note, like someone had flipped a switch. Each time it happened, the silence that followed was so sharp it made my chest tighten, though I couldn't have said why. About 10 minutes in, I saw something lying across the road. At first I figured it was a deer. Happens all the time. They freeze in the headlights, get clipped, stumble off, and collapse in the road. But the closer I got, the less sense it made. The shape was wrong. Deer are solid through the middle, legs tucked or sprawled out. This thing was long and narrow, like something had stretched it from both ends. My stomach went tight before my brain even caught up. I eased the car to a stop about 20 feet away, engine idling low, headlights full on. Whatever it wasn't dead. Its chest, or what I thought was its chest, was moving. Slow, deep, deliberate. Not the quick, fluttery kind of breath you'd expect from a wounded animal. I sat there, both hands gripping the wheel, waiting for it to twitch, to move in a way that made sense. Then I tapped the horn, a quick, sharp blast. The sound cracked through the trees and bounced back. Nothing, not a twitch. I should have thrown it in reverse right then. Should have gone back the way I came. That would have been smart. But I didn't. I put the car in park and got out. The night air was heavy, clinging to my skin like a damp blanket. Gravel crunched under my boots as I walked past the hood, the headlights stretching my shadow long and bent across the tree line. Every nerve in my body screamed, "Stop! Turn around." But I kept going anyway. I got within 10 feet and froze. It wasn't fur. What I'd thought was matted hair was skin, gray, slick-looking, stretched so thin I could see dark lines underneath like veins or bones. Its arms were too long, bent at strange angles that didn't look right. The fingers were spread wide in the dirt, like it was gripping something. Its head was turned away from me, but not like someone lying on their side. It was turned back. So far back it didn't look possible, like there wasn't a spine there to stop it, and then it moved. Not a jolt or a flinch, slow. One arm bent, those long fingers digging into the gravel as it dragged itself forward an inch. No sound, just the scrape of stone under its hand. I stumbled back so fast I nearly fell, slamming into the car door, fumbling for the handle. Got it open, half dove inside, my breath coming too fast. That's when I heard it, soft at first, like it was inside my head. Then louder, click, 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 not a bug, not branches snapping. It was deliberate, timed, coming from its throat, or whatever passed for one. I looked over the roof of the car. It was kneeling now, or something close to it. Its limbs bent wrong, sharp angles like the joints were in the wrong places. Its head, that twisted backward head, was facing me now. The eyes were wrong, too far apart, round and black like holes punched through wet paper. No shine, no reflection. Just empty, then it stood. I don't know how, but it did. Slow, smooth, like it was unfolding. It was taller than me, taller than the car. Its arms hung low, fingertips nearly brushing the ground. The clicking didn't stop. It sped up, faster, faster, until it sounded like a metronome spinning out of control. I slammed the door and hit the gas. Gravel sprayed behind me as the car fishtailed, then caught traction and shot forward. I didn't look back until I hit pavement. When I finally did, it was standing in the middle of the road, perfectly still, watching my taillights fade into the dark. I didn't sleep that night. My dad had this old hunting cabin way out in the Appalachians. I mean way out there. No cell service, no neighbors, just mountains and trees stretching out forever in every direction. His grandfather built it, and for years it was where the family went every deer season. But that winter, it had been sitting empty for months. Right before the big snowstorms were supposed to hit, Dad asked me to ride up with him to check on the place. He wanted to grab some gear he'd left behind and make sure the roof hadn't caved in. I didn't mind. Growing up, those trips were some of my best memories. Me, Dad, and the woods. Back then, it all felt like an adventure. But when you go back as an adult, it feels different. The mountains seem bigger, the silence heavier. You start to realize just how alone you really are out there. We left late in the afternoon, which I told him was a bad idea, but Dad just waved it off. "We'll make it before dark," he said. Famous last words. I drove most of the way while he navigated, and with every mile it felt like we were peeling away layers of civilization. First the gas stations disappeared, then the houses, then even the power lines. Eventually it was just us and the winding switchbacks cutting through endless walls of trees. By the time the dirt road appeared, the sun was gone. The headlights lit up nothing but bare trees and patches of old snow clinging to the ground like mold on bread. I asked if we should turn back and come in the morning. Dad shook his head, said it was better to get it done now. That road barely counted as a road. Deep, frozen ruts. Potholes big enough to swallow a tire. Branches clawing at the sides of the truck. I crawled along, careful not to end up in a ditch. That's when something ran across the headlights. It moved on all fours, but it wasn't a deer. I knew that instantly. The body was too long, the limbs too thin, the movement too smooth. It didn't bound or leap. It glided, low and effortless, like something being poured from one side of the road to the other. Then it was gone. What the hell was that? I muttered. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Dad didn't look at me. He just said probably nothing. Keep driving. But his voice was too careful, too calm. He was lying. When we finally reached the clearing, the cabin looked smaller than I remembered, hunched against the tree line like it was trying to disappear. I parked and killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. No wind, no bugs, no anything. Just stillness pressing in from all sides. Inside it smelled like old wood and dust. The same rickety table, the same stone fireplace, the same 2 bunks shoved into the corner. I got a fire going while Dad walked the perimeter. When he came back, he locked the door behind him. That stopped me. He'd never done that before. You expecting company? I joked, though my voice cracked a little. Never hurts, he muttered without looking at me, and sat down. We ate canned chili in near silence, just the fire popping and my spoon tapping the bowl. I couldn't stop replaying what I'd seen on that road, the long arms, the way it glided, how fast it vanished. I told myself it was the headlights playing tricks. It had to be. Then we heard it, a slow scrape along the outside wall. Not a random creak or settling wood. This was deliberate. Light claws dragging against the siding, biting in deep. It started near the back and crept toward the door. Dad froze. His spoon hung in midair, eyes locked on mine. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he set the spoon down, stood up without a word, and grabbed his rifle. My pulse pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. He yanked the door open. Flashlight cutting through the dark. Nothing. Just the truck glinting with frost and the black smear of trees. Stay here, he said. I wanted to say something, but my mouth wouldn't work. He stepped off the porch, boots crunching in the snow. The beam of his light swung across the clearing, catching flashes of white between the trees. Then he disappeared around the side. A few seconds later, I heard him curse, low and sharp. When he came back, his face was pale and tight. Pack up, now. What? Why? Do what I said. The way he said it snapped me into motion. I started shoving things into my bag, hands shaking so bad I dropped my flashlight twice. Then I saw them, through the window. Tracks, not boots, not paws. Long, narrow impressions spaced too far apart, like something had crawled on hands and feet, but stretched out, unnatural. The fingers, or whatever they were, had carved deep grooves into the snow. We didn't talk while loading the truck. Dad kept the rifle raised, his eyes cutting from the trees to the roof and back again. I climbed in, heart hammering so hard it hurt. When he fired the engine, something moved in the trees. I saw it. Just a flicker, low and fast, weaving between trunks, keeping pace with us as we rolled out of the clearing. I gripped the door handle like it could keep me together. Every time the headlights caught a gap in the woods, I swear I saw it again. Those arms swinging too low, that head hanging, those legs bending the wrong way. It didn't run like an animal or a person. It slid, smooth and silent, like water spilling downhill. The road out felt endless. Every bump rattled through the truck like a gunshot. Once I glanced back, and in the glow of the taillights, something shifted just beyond the edge of the road. Crouched there, perfectly still, like it was waiting. We didn't breathe until the dirt turned to pavement and the trees finally started to thin. Even then, Dad didn't slow down. Miles later, when the first streetlights appeared, he finally spoke. That wasn't an animal. His voice sounded hollow, like the words themselves were too heavy. He didn't look at me, and he didn't say another word for the rest of the drive. We never went back to that cabin. I'd been driving since late afternoon, heading home from a job site in Virginia back to western Kentucky. It had been a long day at the end of a long week, and all I wanted was a hot shower and my own bed. I hate interstates. Too straight, too predictable. Makes me feel like I'm stuck on an assembly line. So when my GPS suggested a rural route through the mountains, I figured, why not? It promised to save an hour, and at that point, an hour felt like gold. At first, it was fine. Winding roads, thick trees, a kind of old-school Americana vibe, the kind of scenery that makes you forget how tired you are. But the deeper I went, the stranger it felt. The curves weren't just sharp. They were relentless. Switchback after switchback, the road twisting in on itself like some cruel joke. What started as 2 decent lanes shrank down to a cracked strip of pavement barely wider than my SUV. No guardrails, either, just a white line and then open air if you misjudged a turn. The sun dipped behind the ridges, and that's when it hit me. I was in the middle of nowhere. When night fell, the world turned into two things: the white tunnel of my headlights and the black blur of trees rushing past on either side. No streetlights, no houses, not even a stray mailbox. Just trees, road, and me. After a while, that emptiness started to crawl under my skin. You know that prickly feeling you get when you realize you haven't seen another car in way too long? That thought kept looping in my head. No headlights coming toward me, no taillights ahead. Just miles of black, and then I saw it. The fuel gauge, a hair under a quarter tank. Normally that wouldn't bother me, but out there with no towns, no gas stations, and no cell towers, it hit differently. My brain went straight into panic mode, cycling through every bad scenario, running out of gas in the middle of nowhere, freezing overnight in the car, or worse, having some stranger appear out of the dark. I could almost hear my mom's voice in my head. "Why didn't you stay on the interstate?" I told myself I'd pull over as soon as I found a safe spot, stretch my legs, check my GPS for the next gas station, and keep moving. 5 miles later, I spotted a break in the trees, a small gravel pull-off, barely big enough for 2 cars. It felt like a blessing. I eased onto the shoulder, put the SUV in park, and cut the engine. For a moment, I just sat there, hands resting on the wheel, listening to the soft tick-tick-tick of the cooling engine. That's when it hit me. Something was off. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it, just this creeping sense that something was wrong. Then I realized what it was. The silence. Not peaceful silence. Not the kind that comes with calm woods. This was hollow, dead, like the world had been drained of sound. My ears actually rang from how quiet it was. And then, cutting through that emptiness, came a sound. Click. Faint, but sharp. From somewhere past the tree line, I froze. Maybe it was nothing. A branch shifting in the wind, maybe. But then it came again. Click. Slow, uneven, not wind, not leaves. It was deliberate. Tapping. Soft, sharp taps spaced too far apart for footsteps, almost like a dog's nails on a hardwood floor. But not quite. Like whoever, or whatever, was making it didn't fully understand how to move its legs. I opened the door slowly, as if being quiet would make any difference, and stepped out. My boots crunched the gravel, loud as a gunshot in the stillness. I stretched, trying to act casual, but my muscles were tight, locked. That clicking sound was still there. Same rhythm, same spot. And now there was something else. Breathing. At least, I think it was breathing. Long, slow inhales, then short exhales, like someone savoring the air. It was so faint I held my own breath just to hear it better. Yeah, breathing. That's when the fear hit me full force. My mind started racing. Bears? Coyotes? A person? That last thought twisted my stomach into a knot. Someone out there standing just past the trees, breathing heavy and making that sound. I told myself to ignore it. Just grab the phone, check the map, get moving. I leaned into the car to grab my phone from the dash. No bars, of course. I turned to get back into the driver's seat. That's when I saw him. Eyes, not glowing, but catching just enough light from my dome lamp to shine like dull coins in the dark. They were low to the ground at first, too low for a person, but then they rose. Not fast, slow, controlled. Something stepped out from the trees. I still don't know how to describe it without sounding insane. It was tall, easily over 7 feet, but the proportions were wrong. Limbs too long, too thin, joints bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. Every movement was careful, deliberate, like it was mimicking something it had seen before but didn't quite understand. Its head tilted in these short, jerky motions like a bird trying to size me up, and its face God. Its face looked almost human. Almost like someone tried to draw a person from memory and got most of the details wrong. The eyes were too far apart, the mouth stretched too wide, the features scrambled, like a bad copy. I froze. My brain screamed, "Move!" But my body wouldn't. Then it opened its mouth. But the voice that came out wasn't its own. It was mine. My exact voice, same tone, same pitch. And it said one word. Run. I didn't even think. My body just moved. I dove into the car so fast I smashed my shoulder against the frame. My keys slipped out of my hand and hit the floor mat. While I scrambled for them, that clicking started again, faster now, circling the SUV. I could hear it scraping through the gravel on both sides. Too quick, too smooth for something that size. I jammed the key into the ignition and turned it. The engine roared to life. I slammed the gear shift into drive and floored it. Gravel exploded behind me as I shot back onto the road. In the rearview mirror, just for a second, I saw it standing in the pull-off, watching me leave. Head cocked, arms hanging like broken branches. I didn't slow down, didn't look back again. My hands were welded to the wheel, and my foot stayed pressed to the gas like my life depended on it. 40 miles later, I saw the glow of a diner sign. I pulled in so hard I nearly clipped a trash can, parked, sat there, gripping the wheel, shaking so bad my fingers hurt. I didn't go inside. Didn't order food. I just sat there for 20 minutes, staring at the empty road behind me.